Aloha and welcome to the Maui Pono Network. And this is an exciting time. We're going to be going live with Tina Wildberger, who's our Maui House representative for the Kihei district. And she's going to have a whole lot to say about what's going on in the state. Hi, Tina. Greetings.
Are you guys ready for me?
We're ready for you, Tina.
Okay.
Take it away, Tina. Woo!
Thank y'all so much. Appreciate you inviting me to join you today. And yes, this is this interval is an opportunity. This interval is a chance for us to reshape Hawaii Nui. We can reimagine our economy. We can reimagine our employment base. We can reimagine our food security. If only we have the right mindset at the right place with the right people. So Paul asked me to talk about economic recovery in this age of COVID-19. It's not going to be May 1, flip the switch. I kind of want to lower everybody's expectations. This is going to be a 2-year event. Okay. How we prepare and how we handle it will determine how quickly we're able to open our economy back up. So it's going to be about a 2-year process. It's going to need to be really carefully coordinated. We're going to be able to open up locally first, and then secondarily we'll be able to open back for mainland flights and hotel occupancy. The key to us being able to reestablish our economy is going to be dependent on 3 things: testing, contact tracing, and data. Right now, our Department of Health is not prepared to do any of that. And that has been evident in the response, the sluggish and seemingly feckless response that we have witnessed. They're doing what they can with what they have. But the fact is that the state has not invested in technology for any of our departments. And before we went live, I was talking a little bit about that, and I'll go into it again. So I'm advocating for robust investment in technology and staffing to support all of these new needs. But we need to not just put technology into the Department of Health. The Department of Agriculture needs technology. The Department of Industrial Relations needs technology, and the Housing and Human Concerns Department also needs to be brought into the 21st century. All of these departments, and the Department of Education, everybody should have everything online. Everything should be accessible, transparent. I always kind of look to the city of San Francisco because they have amazing website and technology access and are extremely customer focused in how they handle everything that they do, regardless of what department you look at. And that's a good sort of benchmark to have as a goal. But it's going to be technology that takes us to the next level. General Hara, who is the incident commander for this entire recovery response and, planning into how we come out of this, he wants to use technology, and he is hoping that we don't have issues of civil liberty contestation. They want to use, cell phone tracking basically to mitigate and control and contain new infections as they come up, so that we are able to open our economy and not have everyone stay at home in perpetuity. So this crisis has exposed many things that we already knew about but haven't really had the will to address. Climate change hasn't vanished. Our need for universal health care is glaringly obvious throughout this crisis. Who would have known that under this Republican mostly administration that we would see an example of universal basic income come out of it? I'm feeling like Andrew Yang must be like, I told you so. This week every working adult and child dependent is going to be populated with income from our federal government. That's unprecedented. So we're seeing things that we never would have imagined as short as 3 months ago. It's my hope that we take the opportunity to create a Hawaii 2.0 that addresses climate change, that addresses income inequality, that addresses food security, particularly for Hawaii, and clean energy. So it's sadly not up to me, but I'm, a voice for our people, and I'm constantly, kind of sending these messages up to the people that are, in the decision-making seats. But we have a chance to invest in local regenerative agriculture. Our food insecurity is kind of staring us in the face right now as we see food processing plants closing across the mainland. The COVID virus has impacted both meat and poultry processing plants. Major producers are throwing food away. We have dairies that are dumping milk. We have farmers that are turning over ripe crops that have not been harvested simply because there wasn't a plan for redistribution of their resources in a different direction from where they had originally intended, whether they were serving restaurants as their customers. And we're seeing a little bit of that here as well. In fact, Paul was describing to me how the people that raise pigs have a need to harvest pigs and suddenly don't have luau's to send their pig meat to. And so there's now farmers cooperatives that are selling pork. And I'm thankful that our county government, thank you to Mayor Victorino, he's investing $30,000 a month to handle farm redistribution of food, taking it out what used to be a restaurant pipeline and putting it into the retail and farmers market pipeline. So I'm really pleased to see that. And there are links for farmers assistance on my website. I have a PowerPoint shared on my website. I'm doing a weekly talk. I just finished my Tuesday talk with Tina from 5 to 5:45 before I joined you. And there are resources there. There's a grant program through the Farm Bureau, and farmers can apply for that grant program. The deadline is the 26th of April, and they're going to be dispersing those grants by May 1. So please go to District 11 South Maui, DIST 11, the letter S, Maui.com. That's my office website. And you can get links about healthcare, about small business, about unemployment, and information now about our farming communities and how we can get some assistance to our farmers. Next, we were going to talk about progressivism in Hawaii, and coming out of 1.5 sessions at the state legislature, I have learned that this is going to be long ball. And I think you all probably understand that very well too, that we're not going to flip a switch and all of a sudden everybody's going to start making these people-focused, INA-focused decisions at our state legislature. It's extremely Oahu-centric. And my whole thing is, I'm kind of like, I have to go live on Oahu all winter, and I did that all wrong. Like, I wouldn't mind going to Oahu all summer. I hate missing winter on Maui. It's really the finest time of year. So I'm definitely taking one for the team. But I kind of go in there with like, y'all messed this place up. And we're just trying to make sure that Maui doesn't end up like this hot mess. So that's kind of where I come from. It's not necessarily too terribly well received, but my style is to kind of point out the naked emperor and say, this isn't working. There are only a couple of us. Ideologically speaking, as far as true progressives, I feel like me and Amy Peruso are kind of the only two. So we need more people. And that's where your incredible efforts come in. If we can get a solid dozen progressives at the State House, we would have a strong voice that could help move our very centralized power structure. There's so few people that have power in their hands, basically leadership and then the committee chairs. And anybody other than that is just one of 51 votes. But the things that happen that I've been surprised about is how bills die. For instance, committee chair can just simply not file the committee report. You can have a bill go through, bill can go through, get assigned to 4 or 5 committees, go through the entire 5 committee process, not have a single no vote against it. And then at the very last committee, that committee chair can just simply not file the committee report, and that bill's dead, no matter who testified on it, no matter who voted for it. And some of these things I was very surprised about. The lack of transparency, the disregard for their colleagues having voted, the people that came or submitted testimony and provided information about how it would either help or hurt a community, whatever the issue. So it's a dirty bit of business, and there's definitely some room for improvement for sure. But having more progressives in that body would definitely help. As I mentioned, our state government is extremely Oahu-centric. That's nothing new. HB 1326, perfect example. The wholesale giveaway of water rights on Maui, brought to you by Oahu legislators. I was surprised to get 9 other no votes to follow me, but it was a big deal that I was voting no in committee and then on the floor, and everyone was just kind of like, oh, what is she doing? She's voting no. You don't do that. And I'm like, oh, that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to make a career. I have a business. I have a home. I have a family. I am in my mid-50s. I am not here to build a career. I'm here to be the voice for our communities that are not being heard by the status quo. So, and it's basically a numbers game. This movement is still in its infancy. I think with the work that Maui Pono Network is doing and the work that Gary Hooser is doing through HAPA is a long-term investment, and that we will see a lot of great results if we continue to do the hard work. Like I said, we need more people like me and Amy. We want to make the progressive agenda more of an imperative rather than a fringe, ignorable minority. As far as my platform is concerned, when I started the second session this year, I was kind of thinking about that as we were coming into second session, and what did I want to focus on? What do I want to work on? I'm on the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee. I'm the vice chair. I'm on the Finance Committee, and I'm also on the Hawaiian Affairs and Water Land Committee. And so I wanted to come in with like hair on fire climate crisis, because I feel like the previous session, precious little had been done to address our climate crisis. And as we spend 2 years in economic recovery from this unprecedented global event, we can't lose 2 years in ignoring the issues that are facing climate change. Even our own governor has suspended the act that governs all of our environmental protection here in Hawaii. Chapter 343 has just been cast aside. And we should all be on the lookout for projects that would normally need an EIS to just be, start the bulldozers. This happened during a previous administration when we had the tsunami. and there was an emergency declaration, and they came in and hardened part of Honoapi'ilani Highway on the way to Lahaina before mile marker 14, before Oluwalu. They hardened a portion of that highway, and it decimated the offshore reef. That reef is dead now. And so we have to be very careful and vigilant that we don't see projects coming up that we don't want to see happen without the appropriate environmental assessment. So now that we have this pandemic threat and virtual economic collapse, everything is upended. So I mentioned before, it may have been before we went live, so I want to say it again, that Maui is number 2 in the nation for negative economic impact for this event. That surprised me. I knew that our economy is decimated, but I didn't know we were scoring number 2. The other municipalities that were on that list were other small Gulf Coast communities that are tightly linked to the fossil fuel industry and oil production in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi. So to get people back to work, we've got to have robust testing, tracing, and data collection. And these programs, the sooner they come up, the sooner that we can start slowly opening up our economy. It's going to happen locally first. And I was glad to hear that General Hara today was suggesting that our state cooperate with the Western states like California, Oregon, and Washington, who have all 3 done an incredible job in the same manner that the Northeastern states are starting to coalesce and cooperate so that we can all kind of coordinate our opening together. And because we have free travel between all of our states as part of our union. And so it's something that we need to kind of cooperate. I think we need to see some major changes at our hospital. You guys have maybe seen some of the issues that are going on there with the cluster of outbreak that's happened. I think they need fundamental change in leadership. We'll see what happens. I guess Kaiser Permanente has brought in big guns to figure out what they're not doing right. And I hope that they can realize a dramatic change in corporate climate, because it's super toxic over there. And my inbox is blowing up with nurses and doctors begging for help and asking for anonymity because it's such a terrible work environment there. And our healthcare workers only have one choice, one hospital. They can't quit and go work at Queens or go work at Kapiolani. We only have one hospital here. And perhaps this toxic climate is part of the reason we're losing healthcare workers here. I know South Maui lost 3 doctors just in this last year. So we need to make it a better climate for our healthcare providers to be able to take our healthcare to a higher level, because we really are a third world here in Maui County as far as healthcare goes. I'd like to make sure I mention that our climate crisis doesn't take a back seat in this recovery. We can't lose 2 years to the rising sea temperatures, and we want to get our economy back on our feet. I want to point out that some things are not so bad about this. For instance, our wastewater treatment plants are no longer injecting right now. They're not using the injection wells. They don't have too much water to treat and distribute. And so our offshore waters are pristine and beautiful right now. So while you get a chance, try to hop in the water since we're still allowed to do that. It's important that we notice and measure what is good now while we move through this forced pause, so that we can imagine a better, more vibrant, more diverse economy in Hawaii Nui. Thank you all so much.
Mahalo. Thank you so much, Tina. We're going to open up the questions to our panel right now. So anyone currently on with questions, go ahead.
Hi, Tina. Thank you so much for all you're doing and really supporting our whole community and getting back on its feet. I mean, this is something that I'm sure the repercussions we're just starting to see. And I'm glad you're on top of it to really support our community and keep them informed on all of these things. You mentioned that we don't have very many progressives in the state representatives right now. How would you view the state representatives we have here in Maui County? And do you feel that any of them are progressive, or there's a lot of very good young progressive candidates who are coming up for election? Would you recommend focusing more on those young candidates?
You know, I ran in 2016, and my little tagline was that our communities deserve a choice in who represents them. And so I think what's most important is that we don't have uncontested races. Everybody's got to have a choice, and there has to be a conversation about what our communities want and need. And if you don't have a challenger, then the incumbent doesn't have to offer a message and doesn't have to create inspiration. And so, and now that I'm an incumbent, I welcome a challenger. I'm not a hypocrite. We got to have a conversation. We have to talk about what we're going to do for, or, at least what kind of voice we're going to bring to our community, and what kind of values and what kind of focus you want to see, and what kind of change we want to bring. So I'm really glad to see a lot of people stepping up, and I think it's healthy for each district to be able to have a conversation.
There's a lot of great ideas, great energy that can really help us have a situation that supports the people in the INA instead of big money interests. So I think this is so crucial, especially during this transition time, as you mentioned, Tina. It's, while we're in this whole catastrophe, there's opportunities on both sides. And if we're not diligent, we may lose a lot of our environmental issues and concerns and other progressive issues that we've been fighting so hard for. They may go down the drain if we are not due diligence in all of this.
Precisely. Those are women's issues, children's issues, LGBT issues, environmental issues, agriculture, everything. We could become entirely consumed by our recovery. So it's important that everyone who has special interest uplifts the needs of those special interests, especially at this time, because you're right, it's really easy to just go, oh no, we got to get this economy started. We don't have time or money for any of that. And I was having a discussion on Facebook. I try to be careful about this stuff because I don't want to get in any trouble, but it was a delightful young man who's also running for as a challenger for an Oahu seat, who is a representative for one of the government unions, and he was advocating for their pay raises. And I'm like, brah, you think anybody's going to get a pay raise? There's just not going to be money for pay raises. And I'm like, let me be honest. Like, well, you legislators are supposed to get a pay raise. And I'm like, I am not taking a pay raise. And if they don't across the board cancel that pay raise, I'll be donating mine to the food bank. I already, during the minimum wage fight, and I'll call it a fight because it was a fight, they came up with a lukewarm slow roll to $13 an hour for our minimum wage earners. And as a small business person who ran on a platform for a $15 minimum wage 2 whole years ago, I was very disappointed and spoke out about that a lot, perhaps to my relationship detriment with my colleagues. But I did a little video pledge that I was going to donate the difference between $13 an hour and $15 an hour, which is $4,000 a year, to cancel out student lunch debt, because I don't want to take a raise that the state doesn't want to give to the lowest paid, hardest working people in our society. It just doesn't sit right with me. I can't take the money.
But how do you see this working economically for Maui? What do you give to the people of Maui over the next, say, 3 months or 4 months as far as their lives are concerned? What do you see that you're going to push for in the state to work with that? And also the second question is, what is going to happen within the legislative system? Because it's basically it's being suspended as of now, from what I understand. How are you going to work that? Or is it going to be, could you go into that a little bit too, please?
So it's uncertain. So because we have a biennium, they were comfortable suspending this session because the biennium covers the 2 fiscal years. And with the governor's emergency powers, he can fund whatever he needs to fund based on our needs. Chair Luke, our finance chair today, was talking about, obviously neighbor island legislators are extremely concerned about getting our fair share of the 1.25 billion that's going to come to the counties, with the caveat that municipalities over 500,000 in population, which is Oahu, will get 42% of that funding. And then we're, asking Chair Luke, well, we want to make sure, because we've seen what happens with the transient accommodations tax. Maui creates an awful lot of it and doesn't see too much of it coming back. So she was very frank and said that that money is not going to be allocated per capita or by any specific metric that is equitable or anything. She just said it's going to be allocated where the needs are. And she indicated that, we're going to be busy trying to make sure people have food. We're going to be basically taking care of the most basic needs of our people across the state. And so wherever those needs are, that's where she said the funding's going to go.
Is there a possibility that you can utilize the fact that Maui County is going to be the hardest hit in the entire state economically as perhaps some leverage with her?
I shared that Newsweek article with her to make sure that that's, on their mind, so that they understand, what the challenges are. But I mean, Kalihi's hungry right now, and Molokai is having a hard time. They don't even have access to their grocery stores, and they're talking about shipping food over. So we're, all of our food banks are depleted. They need support. And I'm glad to see that Sherry Romana and the rapid response team was able to get a modicum of funding, because we really need to address this COVID virus crisis in our unhoused, our shelterless community, because that's where we're going to see community spread that's going to affect all of us. We all go to the grocery store. Everybody goes to the grocery store. So we've got to bring resources to those communities.
Okay, so is there anything at all that can be done on the state level regarding being able to suspend rent or anything like that? Because there are people that are desperate right now that are about to lose their housing. Is there any kind of suspension we can do that on a 60 to 90 day basis or something like that for people?
Actually, I advocated for that #skip2Q, where we just take a pause in April, May, and June and say no rent, no mortgage, no eviction, no foreclosure for 90 days. I think we're going to need that. I think that's where there is a hole in in all of the economic response programs. That's a big cavernous missing component. And so I'm screaming to the mountaintops about it, but that's why people are not that interested in this job. It's a powerless job. You're a voice of 1 in 51. And so unless another 25 people are demanding it, it's hard to make it happen. And I think that is something, because like my mortgage isn't a Hawaii bank. My mortgage is a mainland bank. So I think that's something we need from our national delegation. We need a national no rent, no mortgage, no eviction, nor foreclosure for 90 days. I agree.
Can I just say, how Tulsi Gabbard or Brian Schatz has these Like town hall meetings, they do via phone, and then you know, give the number of people to call in, and you know about those, right? Town hall
Yeah,
meetings.
and I've been doing them too. Every talk with Tina Tuesday, and I had my staff the first 2 weeks ago. My staff was there, and then last week I had like 2 people, but tonight I had 9. So absolutely, and anything that's fun. I'm doing a Friday art party, Pauhana art party, and we're drawing online, and we had almost nobody show up last week, but anything that you can do to get your message out, you know, branding's going to be important, and it's going to be all electronic this year. I mean, look at the Maui News is almost non-existent, right?
Right. How about is the Kuleana? That's not going on right now. The recruiting candidates or
they're not doing another class before the 2020 election. They're working behind the scenes with candidates one-on-one and offering support and help, but they're not going to have another Kuleana Academy before the 2020 election.
That's too bad. Yeah. Bummers. Everybody came out of that, like you and Kiani and
Amy.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Do I need more light? There, that's better.
So Laura, you had some questions also?
I'm done.
Hi. So our county charter said that we're only supposed to have 30% tourists, and it was up at 40% at the time that the pandemic hit. And what I'm seeing is we were putting all our eggs in one basket, and so that is why we're so devastated. And in this time where we can remake ourselves and make a redo, so we don't focus as much on tourism or get our farming better, or find different places in the economy for local, and you disappeared. So I was wondering what your thoughts on about redoing the economy.
So if we can muster some imagination, and if some of y'all have been here a long time too, like I have, like I'm not anti-tourism.
No.
I made my whole life and my whole economy and everything that I have is because I worked hard in the tourism industry before we had the ice business. I love tourism. So I am not a tourism naysayer, but I firmly believe it's about quality and not quantity. We can go back to the tourism that we had in the 90s, where we had high spending, less density, and kind of get away from the bargain basement, you know, trample over everything, kind of disregard that, you know, we've seen kind of inundate us. And so I'm about tourism and diversifying our economy. We need to not just, we're not going to be able to walk away from tourism. That's realistic, but we can control what kind of tourists we bring here, what kind of tourists we market to. Do we give the Maui Visitors Bureau $3.5 million every year when the other counties only give $250,000 to their visitor industry organizations? Do we reduce the number of cars on the road? Do we make sure that the tourism industry is paying for the infrastructure that it uses when they come here, like our wastewater treatment and our roads? So I feel like it is, and I said this earlier, I think before we went live, that in Mandarin, my esteemed colleague Amy Peruso, who studied in China and speaks Mandarin, understands that the word for catastrophe and opportunity are the same, or crisis and opportunity are the same word in Mandarin. And so we will have opportunities, and it's about whether or not we muster the imagination to realize a new and improved Hawaii 2.0 that includes sustainable regenerative agriculture. I highlighted, I went to Puerto Rico for a conference before all of this excitement back in early December. And we did my office manager went with me, and we reached out to the Red Cross, which is doing a lot of disaster relief there still. And we met with the Red Cross folks, the Cruz Roja, and it was entirely women-run organization. There wasn't a man to be seen. And they were putting PV systems with battery storage in a school in every single county, or their province, their county equivalents, that would supply 3 classrooms and the cafeteria with power and storage, rated to a Cat 5 hurricane in every single district. They're also propping up women organic farmers all across the territory. So they're doing incredibly outside the box, incredible work. And we could do the same thing here, but we have to just make sure that the people who are, making the decisions are presented with the ideas and are inspired to realize these opportunities.
Yeah. So it seems that the most important thing is getting the right people in office. That's
It
getting the
probably
right
boils
people
down
in,
every
then we have it. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah, I wonder
Well, I do have.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Another question I have is this whole thing about putting 5G in, that they're trying to sneak it through now that this pandemic is here. And what can we do, or what can you do to help stop this?
Okay,
Or
so
what is your feeling on it?
5G is a thing. I have been writing, I don't know if you all know Deborah Green. She is our premier 5G information person. And I respect her a lot, and she knows a lot about it. I don't think that this pandemic is linked to 5G in any way.
No, I don't think
whatsoever.
so either.
I did mention that our environmental charter, the chapter 343, has been suspended, and that's a problem. And we do need to be on the lookout for things that would normally need environmental assessment. I have been writing resolutions in the last, I was going to do it again this year, but of course it's suspended. But last year I wrote a resolution to please study and make sure that this technology is safe, because there have been so many municipalities that have decided that it isn't safe. And so sadly, the committee that hears that resolution, the Commerce Committee, their vice chair is like, oh, I like 5G. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it needs to be looked at. I feel like it needs to be looked at. I don't want a tower near my house. I noticed they put some new infrastructure up on Kihei Surfside down by Keawakapu. And they got them painted up the same color as the building, so hopefully you don't notice. But I just noticed those the other day. I don't know if they're brand new or what. But 5G has not been deployed here yet that we know of. Supposedly it's coming. Supposedly we can't have autonomous vehicles without it. Supposedly we can't have all of these technological improvements without it. So we need to make sure it's safe if we're going to deploy that here.
Okay, and my other question is, I heard that IGE wants to make it mandatory for all school children to be vaccinated, and I wonder if you support or reject that.
That was a draconian, the new guidance from the Department of Health was extremely strong, and there's a robust movement to speak out against that, and I support that movement. I am not an anti-vaxxer. I am a safe vaxxer. Make the vaccine safe. I got vaccinated when I was a kid, and I don't know anybody that was vaccine injured in the 60s. But I know a lot of people that were vaccine injured in the last 20 years, and it's devastating. I have friends who have an adult developmentally disabled child or woman. Their child is now a developmentally disabled woman who, you know, their lives were ruined, and they had resources. They had financial resources to get all of the help they can, and they have the hardest life I've ever witnessed. And so I support safe vaccines, and I would like to hold our CDC and our medical community accountable for maybe not making vaccines that have an incredible shelf life that makes them a lot of money because it doesn't have an expiry date, but is full of preservatives and harmful chemicals that are detrimental when given to tiny babies in large quantities. So yeah, I support that movement, and I don't like that they've been kind of ostracized by the community when they're just trying to make sure they can keep their kids safe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Aloha, Tina. Thank you so much. Just on that note, I have a few questions, but since we're talking about this on the topic of vaccines, now that I know that you have mentioned earlier about how this is going to open up the economy once more, how we can get things sort of flowing. You mentioned testing, tracing, and data. Now, you also had mentioned before we got on the Facebook call here about herd immunity and the vaccine that's being implemented or, brought up actually. So with that regard, what can you perhaps share with us regarding what's coming down the pipeline with these things?
Well, it's all ideas right now. Everybody's just kind of talking about what, the think tanks that they put together to, and I'm reassured, frankly, because I don't always have high hopes for some of the people in charge, but they've put what seems to be a smart team together that are data driven and science driven, and they run large organizations successfully. And so we're going to have to make a big investment in technology. And basically the Department of Health is going to have to hire 100 people to do this contact tracing, where as soon as we need quick turnaround testing, we need instant test, mouth swab back in 3 minutes to tell you whether you're test positive or not. And then, okay, who have you been around? Okay, we've got to call all 50 people you've been, where did you go? Where did you eat? Where did you shop?
Now, is that going to be part of the, you mentioned cell phone tracking to mitigate the infection that General Haro was speaking of. Is that seems like that would be the strategy, hey?
That's the way it's going to have to go. Apple and Google are all working on whatever they're going to put together for that, and then we're going to have the debate about privacy and civil liberty versus economic catastrophe and isolation, and then we'll eventually have a vaccine in another 18 months or so.
Gotcha. So what sort of comes to my attention is the aspect of mass surveillance, and as you said, the thing of privacy and civil liberty. So the governments are looking for greater transparency as far as our privacy goes. Yet when it comes to these think tanks, or even think tanks and these government operations that are going on, decisions that are being made that you as a person in the house have ear to. Is there any way that you could share with us of how we can gain more transparency, especially during a time right now that is of this emergency situation where it seems that laws are being actually created or passed or bypassed, where now we have to keep our eyes open for these projects that don't, that used to require EIS, environmental impact statement. Well, now, you know, obviously people are going to be trying to opportune on that behind everyone's back. So what is it that we can do as a people, as a community, to have more eyes on, to see more transparency within these processes, the think tanks or the government organizations themselves?
Well, I really recommend everybody watch these briefings. I mean, I never in my life had I ever watched Senate briefings before, but the Senate briefing is bringing out a lot of information, and so does the House COVID Finance Committee. Watch what they're talking about. They're talking about it. They're offering their PowerPoints on the website, and so if you haven't been there and looked at that stuff, it's full of a lot of information. Information sharing is going to be one of all of this is going to require voluntary cooperation. If we don't have the mass community voluntarily cooperating, none of it will be successful. So draconian martial law type operating isn't going to be successful. We all are going to have to work together, and just the way we're all staying home together, alone together, voluntarily, is how we're going to get through this. And so we are exposed, and we are at risk of having projects sneak through that shouldn't, and we should all be vigilant and watching, and we'll have to speak up and mobilize and grassroots organize for anything that we see that might be happening that we don't want to have happen. There's a list of shovel-ready CIP projects that's completely disclosed on that COVID website from Kyle Yamashita, who's our CIP chair, showing what they're going to go ahead and go with, things that have been planned, things that have been asked for, things like the high school, Kihei High School. That's nothing three negatives, nothing nobody doesn't want. So I don't mean to create fear or distrust, but we all need to be in this together. We need our government to take these steps to get us out. We can't go on in perpetuity in the manner we are now. And so I frankly don't have a problem with somebody tracking my cell phone if I've infected people and they need to tell the people that I've infected that they need to isolate. I have no problem with that, frankly.
Right. Well, it really comes down to having I love what you said there, that it's mass community voluntarily cooperating. Like if we can have everyone with eyes on with this, now it is a lot to digest. It's like choosing to watch the Senate briefings rather than the next episode on HBO or something. It's not the most exciting, but
you can alternate between Tiger King and the Senate briefings. Donovan Kim is good TV.
Good TV for sure. So let me ask you one more question. Now we need to have these conversations, and I wonder what just to kind of tag on to the last part of my question there. Is it possible to not only just pay attention to what's going on the Senate briefings or in the House Finance Committee? You said the House COVID Finance Committee?
Yeah.
Okay, so as far as that goes, what else, let me be more specific here, is, aside from maybe emailing our representatives, or like what is the way that we can most be engaged? I mean, yes, we have to all have our eyes on and perhaps have an enormous sense of new community gathering. It's like maybe more of this in a mass community gathering, but to have our voices actually heard and have understanding, like what's really going on. Like it seems like these decisions are being made, yet I haven't had any say. I would love to be a part of the conversation.
These two committees are not taking testimony, sadly. Unlike a normal committee that has hearings where you're able to offer testimony, they are not accepting testimony. Now, it doesn't mean that if you write to your representatives or write to the people on the committee that they wouldn't, read your email or hear your idea. But it is an emergency, unprecedented emergency situation, and so normal method of operating just frankly isn't going to be possible or practical. And hopefully the people that are making decisions won't take advantage of that. That's what we have to hope.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Tina. A big
It's a
takeaway:
pleasure.
mass community voluntarily cooperating together. All right, everybody, let's keep our eyes on.
Information.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you all so much.
Tina, I'd like to thank you so much for being part of this interview and for including us and really taking this time and being part of this solution we all need to be part of.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate the invitation. Have a great night. See
Thank
you
you,
on the campaign trail.
Yes, and plug in at the MauiPonoNetwork.org. If you have an opportunity to volunteer and plug in, please do.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Nice seeing everybody. Thank you so much. Aloha.